friends, and welcome back to our read aloud of The Crowns of Croswald by D.E. Knight. We will be reading chapter 5. Now, this particular chapter will be divided into two parts, so make sure that you watch both parts so that you don't miss out on any important information. Let's get started. Chapter 5, Old Still Lane. If you look at the picture, it looks like a box with two hairy arms coming out of the sides. Ooh, that sounds really interesting. Ivy was certain that she had never experienced a stranger 2 hours than the ones she had just lived. She closed Mr. Munson's door behind her, pulling tightly on its rusted knob. It was giving her some trouble. After fiddling, she finally got the stubborn thing to close. Just as she turned around, Ivy was nearly knocked over by a horse and carriage that flew recklessly by. "Move out of the way!" yelled the hasty driver. Her nerves on edge, she jumped back as the magnificent carriage with polished wheels made its way up the street. The drapery inside the windows made it impossible to see who nearly ran her over. Such an inconsiderate royal, she thought to herself. Don't they watch where they're going? Of course not. They can't even steer their own horses. Only royals plunged through town that way. The carriage parked outside the Crownery, right where the Dark Queen's now vanished carriage had been. This carriage most likely held a princess celebrating her birthday and receiving her crown before starting at the halls. No wonder the hurry. According to the day's Scriven This headline, 3 crowns were leaving the Crownery today, an event sure to cause a traffic jam on New Hollow Road. Mr. Munson was right. Town was beginning to fill itself again and rather quickly. The old wood and stone buildings of the merchant area stretched for about a mile. Handmade signs by craft store owners anxious to make a brum or two hung as high as the owner's ladder could reach. Small dwellings were scattered above most shops in town, and others clung to the walls between them. Normally, it was a hard day's work for most that lived here, and Old Still Lane didn't have much to be excited about. But today was unlike any other day. Not only was it Moon's Day and the start of the school year at the halls, but the Dark Queen's unexpected visit had everyone on edge. The delay set townspeople hurrying to wherever they needed to be. Curtains were now drawn back and windows throughout town swung wide open. The town's collective chatter grew deafening. Ivy nervously felt the small pouch that Rimbrick had given her. It was considerably lighter than when she set out from the cabby. Spotting Bullockwists across the way, Ivy took 3 short steps down the street when she heard a strange whistle from above. "Hello, girl! Are you the one delivering Moonsday pies? I declare, I've never seen someone so disheveled. Your bag does look heavy. We'll take 5. Rather, we'll take 10. Whatever you have. Moonsday pies are his favorite. The cream, the meringue." Ivy looked up and saw a broad woman with all her hair stuffed in a nightcap hanging out her dwelling window. She lived above and to the right of Mr. Munson's shop. However, her size would suggest she lived beside the town baker instead. "Sorry, but I think you've mistaken me for someone else." "Oh, I just saw the bag and the uniform, dearie. Ordered for delivery because, well..." She nodded nervously in the direction of the Crownery. "What have you got in that bag if it's not pastries?" "Books. For school." Ivy herself could hardly believe that it was the truth. "Well then, isn't that nice? You'll be in the class with my Woodley. I can tell that you'll be a squinch. No crown." She winked. "I'm Mrs. Butterlove, of course." She batted her lashes and pursed her lips as if Ivy should have known of her fame. "Well, good morning to you, Mrs. Butterlove. Is it..." "I beg your pardon?" "Is it a good morning?" Even though Mrs. Butterlove was clearly anxious, she also loved to talk. "Are you worried about our Dark Queen's visit?" Ivy asked, craning her neck. "Oh, there you are, Woodley." She intentionally interrupted Ivy. "You've finally woken, I see. This girl. I'm sorry, what did you say your name was?" Ivy, Ivy lovely. Pleasure. Woodley's shaggy head popped out of the window, and the two of them stared down at her. He held a fistful of buttered bread halfway to his mouth. Woodley was a round boy who usually introduced himself this way. Hello, my name's Woodley Butterlove, and yes, I do love butter. When shaking his hand, greeters were inevitably left with a sheen of grease on their palm. It was fortunate his name wasn't Woodley Toadlove. Oh my goodness, so can you imagine you're meeting someone new, you're shaking their hand, and then you're left with butter grease all over your hands. Ooh, all of their hands must be slippery. Nice to meet you. Well then, I'll leave you two to your breakfast. Mr. Butterlove nodded, then closed the upstairs window, though her voice could still be heard quite clearly. Really, Woodley? How could you possibly still be hungry? As Ivy walked on, it became clear that the Dark Queen's visit was the talk of the town. Everyone on Old Stone Lane seemed ill at ease. Gossip pulsed through the air. Ivy overheard different snippets of conversations with each step toward Bulloquist's she took. She listened closely, eager to hear what everyone was discussing. What do you suppose she's doing here? A frazzled woman asked two others beside her while laying her shaking hand against her chest. And at the crownery, no less. The selector can't be too happy about that. The three women stood close together, heads inclined to hear each other's whispers. Perhaps the selector no longer cares, the tallest drawled. The third interjected. You two would just die to hear what I know. Tell us! Tell us! Well, one of the royals missed her appointment to receive her crown. And you know they are nearly always collected early. First chance at magic. What kind of royal wouldn't pick up a crown? The tall woman nearly had to bend over double to hear the other two's chatter. It's the first time it's happened, and the first time the queen's been here. Don't you think it's a bit odd? And right before school starts? Hundreds of moons, thousands of 16th birthdays, and never a crown forgotten. Perhaps she decided to pick up a crown from Munson's, but then was scared off by those poke and spell words. The women cackled. Ivy giggled too, and Humboldt squealed. At once, all three women turned to see who was eavesdropping behind them. Sorry, Ivy apologized awkwardly. The three huffed and puffed before walking away in three different directions. Ooh, someone forgot to pick up the crown. I wonder who it is. I have some predictions, but let's continue reading to figure it out. As the women cleared the way, an oversized iron inkwell came into view. It spilled the words of a sign that read, Bulloquists, all but your quills. The inkwell dripped of real ink, usually from the day's specials, which colored the hair of a patron or two. Unlike Munson's, the windows had no heavy curtains and the late morning light shone into the shop. Bulloquist's was perfectly symmetrical, with rows of varnished wood all chest high, inviting shoppers to sample the vials of inks that filled the store. Every counter had several writing stations, each equipped with a small stack of neat parchment sheets, an inkwell, in varied colors and sizes, but all made of hand-blown glass and etched with the initials BB, and a well-worn quill. Just looking at them, Ivy could sense that these old quills had been retired. They were simply writing instruments, rather than magical instruments that happened to write. Many of these quills had come to call Bulloquist's home after their first owners were revoked of the scrivener's title for any matter of infraction. Bouvier Bulloquist, who was himself shaped like an old quill, tall and curved forward after an entire lifetime wrapped over a desk, guided Ivy through dozens of inks, each one serving a different purpose. She sampled a few. The ones that stood out were the ones she didn't want. Stink ink specifically, which had an awful odor, worse than rotten cabbage or cheese left in the sun. Ooh, can you imagine you're writing down your notes, and then every time that you write, the ink smelled of rotten cheese. Sounds disgusting. Then there was Visiblink, a school requirement, only visible from straight on, which made cheating in class impossible. Ivy determined that this was the most wonderful store imaginable. She was dying to sketch. With a cheerful goodbye and even fewer brums, Ivy was out the door. As she decided where to go next, a hand on her shoulder startled her. It was Finn again, this time with boxes stacked in his arms. "Ivy, there you are! Been looking for you. Forgot to tell you, it's best to drop off your supplies at Chittings. You don't want to be carrying all that nonsense with you at midnight orientate." 3 barely closed boxes nearly tumbled out of Finn's arms. "I've actually just come from there, picking up packages. But I wish I could have Warwick do the heavy lifting on these," he continued, gesturing to his 3 unevenly stacked boxes. "Looks like you don't have a hair yet. Pick a bright one for the night celebration. Have you ever been to a Moon's Day celebration in Ravenshallow? The Lantern Walk is especially fantastic here." No. Every Moon's Day she could remember was spent laboring in the Plum's cauldron cellar. "Who's Warwick?" "The cursus publicus and concierge. Delivers your belongings directly to your dormitory. You'll need to set up your account first at the front desk. Not to worry, packages almost always get to their proper destination." Almost always? That doesn't sound reassuring at all. Finn smiled. He had a wide grin that lit up his face and made his green eyes sparkle. Ivy blushed and thanked him. The top box jiggled and rattled. "Well, got to go," he said somewhat urgently and rushed off. We're going to end part 1 there, so keep an eye out for part 2 of chapter 5.